My story begins in Babylon, New York, where I grew up. As a child, I was pretty unsettled and usually in some kind of trouble. Like a lot of kids I hung around with, I had a lot of trouble coping with authority. I even managed to get expelled not once, but twice. I was forced to graduate from an alternative school where they sent all the burnouts like me. I had to fight or be tormented by these other kids every single day. I just hated it there, and I couldn't stand coming home, sometimes even more. Right after my 18th birthday, I was kicked out of my house by my own mother. Sadly, she made my life so intolerable that I would have moved out on my own, even if she hadn't forced me to. Either way. So there I was out on my own with only a couple $100 in my pocket that my father had given me to get started off with. So out I went. I had this tiny little 400 square foot studio apartment I shared with two other renters, my 15-year-old Chevy Caprice, and a job making sandwiches at a deli, along with this part-time job I had working as a cook downtown at a nightclub, just to keep up with bare necessities. So, in the beginning for me, everything I did was always a challenge, especially for somebody my age. It always seemed like every month was the same old story repeated like some terrible, horrible movie. You probably know what I mean. You could feel it down in the pit of your stomach when you feel it. It's like I didn't even realize it, but I was trapped in the rat race like everybody else. As month after month passed by, I was just getting more and more tired of being worn out, either physically from working all the time, all the hours, or just mentally from never having enough money for things. I was just tired of making the choice whether I should either have my rent paid or have car insurance. Neither was a good choice, but I certainly could not afford to have both at the same time. I was always juggling either the electric and the phone bill. It was crazy, and I almost never answered the phone because I was always too scared of who it might have been on the other end of the phone looking for me. So I was so tired of all that stuff constantly draining my energy. I was always working at least 2 jobs minimum just to keep the bill collectors from bothering me and to also keep that old car of mine running. Not to mention trying to have some kind of a social life going on like my friends seem to be enjoying at my age. For me, everything just seemed a lot harder than it should have to be. Anyway, shortly after venturing out on my career, if you can even call it that, right? Trouble struck, as it usually does when you very much least expect it. Within a matter of only a week's time, I lost my beloved father, my mentor, and my best friend all in an instant. Along with all that, I also lost my unfaithful fiance and also my mind. So when I say I started with nothing, I mean it in the most literal way. I not only had nothing emotionally or monetarily, I was terribly alone too. My cherished inner circle that I counted on for support was either gone or had left me now. I guess you could say disappointment should have easily destroyed me. But instead of focusing on all that pain, I just chose to trust in myself instead, to stay strong and reflect on what was happening in my life. I knew something had to change. What I was doing certainly wasn't working. Then I just let all that anguish drive me to some higher standards I began setting for myself. No longer was I going to live like this anymore. Growing up, I thought working in the family restaurant business was what I was destined to do, what I was supposed to do. But I had to stop and I had to think about it. I knew my heart wasn't there. It wasn't doing what I was doing, that was for sure. I hated going there every day. I hated that job. It felt so mechanical, so depressing, and almost robotic to me. What was really interesting to me were all those really cool custom cars I'd see out in the parking lot all the time, and all those really neat electronics I see people putting in them. All that technical stuff like building custom stereo systems, car alarms, and wiring and all that. It just seemed so amazing to me whenever I was around just to admire it. So I began to self-teach myself all the things I could find out about electrical, little by little, learning to rewire the radio on my own car's dashboard over and over again until I got it down to a science and I knew exactly where all the colors meant, what all the wires did, what the functions were, and where they went. I would even offer to put in my friend's 6x9 speakers, their antennas, powered EQs, amps, whatever else they had lying around just for free, just for the sheer fun of it. I would buy used alarms and I'd work for hours trying to figure those things out, and just try to understand what made them tick and see how you could remotely work door locks, open trunks, turn on lights, and do all that kind of stuff. time just didn't seem to exist for me when I was doing this stuff for some reason. I just loved doing it so much. It's like nothing else I've ever done before. So shortly after working my shift down at the deli from 4 to 2, I applied at the stereo shop down the road as a part-time installer. I was lucky enough to get a job sweeping, picking up parts around town and helping the guys customize cars as an assistant, doing paint work, spoilers, and a little bit of audio work here and there sometimes. I knew this is where I really wanted to be. For once, I actually felt happy to go to work, and I couldn't wait to get there every day. This shop was actually one of TV's most famously featured stereo shops in the entire country, but that's another story. But now, here's where my real education began. The pay stunk, and the work certainly wasn't very glamorous by any means, but I was happy to be there since it was just all the knowledge I was soaking up every day about how the business worked like a sponge. I know it sounds a little corny, maybe even a little crazy, but there was just something about it, even just standing out in the parking lot covered with electrical tape pieces and butt connectors and wires strewn around and all the customers' cars parked all over the place. It just somehow did it for me. I began to dream what it would be like if someday I could have a place like this. But for me, that's all it was. It was just that. It was just a dream. My fascination with this business was really starting to consume my mind. I recall dumpster diving back then at nighttime. I used to go in there and grab extra parts that the stereo shops just threw away, just to learn why they did what they did, and I'd take them home and tinker with them in my free time. I practiced dissecting these parts and reading books on the topics and just trying to educate myself any way I could to find out how all this fascinating work was done. I even took invoices from the stereo's trash cans to see where they bought their stuff from. I wanted to know it all, because somehow in my twisted mind I could always fantasize in my own imagination how one day I could be having the UPS guy delivering to my store, right? So anyway, on weekends, I remember stopping into other stereo shops just to browse the showrooms and see what the installers were working on through the windows. And I remember I used to spend lots of my free time just doing that. I also had some other pretty interesting methods of learning this business, like this one time, I'll never forget it. When I was at this corner gas station and my stereo got this other kid's attention. So he came up to me and he asked me, where did I get it from? So I said, I did it all myself. Obviously, he said, wow, can you do mine? I said, sure, I'll be glad to. I followed him back to his house and he showed me literally milk crates full of his collection of amps, processors, stuff like I had never even seen before. So I was like out of my mind. So we agreed on a price and a time to do the job, and so I did it. And it was an awesome chance for me to put together my first real big audio system by myself with everything I knew and had learned up to this point. But little did this guy know about how little I understood how cars were constructed. I must have mounted at least 6 amps to the bottom of this poor guy's trunk with 6-inch self-tapping screws. I don't think I missed this kid's gas tank with one of them. This poor guy stalked me for months on the phone, and I will never forget him. What a lesson that was for both of us. I feel terrible about it now looking back, but unfortunately that was part of the learning process for me, and it was far from one of the dumbest mistakes I would soon be making. About this time, my part-time stereo shop job was becoming a little bit too part-time, so I started looking elsewhere for something else, something a little bit more substantial, a little better. So sure enough, I found this other place that I was able to get into by telling the manager just how much I knew and what a master installer I was. Of course, I was anything but one. But anyway, at this new shop, I was learning more than I've ever learned before, working next to guys with a real lot of experience. These guys were like ninjas to me. So I watched them do stuff like reading electrical schematics, verifying attack wire, wiring up relays, using a multimeter, and testing equipment on the workbench. Here I was able to fake it to make it for about a month or so before they figured out that I was full of crap. And shortly after they proceeded to can me. But that was long enough for me to take what I learned from here, move on to the next place, and apply what I now knew here to the new place, getting a little bit better each time. I got so used to being fired that I could actually sense the day was going to happen, if you could believe it. I can remember at least 6 shops that I worked at that caught on to my bullshit story. I could tell them all that I was experienced when I really had little to no ability to do the job at all. It always had the same exact ending, getting fired at one place after another. It became just so normal to me. but I did it so I could learn everything I wanted to know so desperately. I felt the need to get to the level where I was confident enough to start out installing on my own, or at least on a professional level, or at least work confidently enough to work at a job somewhere without having the constant fear from getting fired from it. My passion for learning was so strong that I didn't care how many teachers I had. I just wanted to be a student, and since I had that full-time job at the deli still to cover my rent, I had the best of both worlds. I just figured I'd learn to fly on my way down. Now, at my next part-time job, I learned more about building complex, high-end fabrication work and all that kind of stuff, which was awesome. And when it wasn't busy in the back in the shop, in the install bay, I used to listen in on a salesman, talking to the walk-in customers down over in the showroom, since it was one door that connected the two together. So I remember this one time, there was this nasally sounding sales guy everybody called Squiggy, because he talks like this, he's kind of funny. So this one time, Squiggy was trying to sell this one overpriced Alpine radio to this guy on the sales floor, and the customer repeatedly told him over and over he had a budget to work with, but always says, it's a top-line Alpine, you can't beat the thing with the super deal, and all that stuff. The guy got so pissed off, he ran out the door, he said, "The hell with you," and he started to leave. So I saw all this stuff going down, and I said, okay, here's my opportunity. So I ran out the side door really quick, went up to the dude, and I said, "Hey man, I heard what happened in there. Brutal." I said, "If you still want to get a good deal on a radio, I have one for you." So this was my first retail sale, which wound up being a radio install in the driveway at my apartment. He got his deal, I made a sale, and a customer happy, all for the very first time. But much more importantly, I was learning basic business skills at the same time. The very next day, my boss told me that he saw me selling his customer stuff out of the trunk of my car, and the cameras caught me, so he proceeded to fire me. Again, it was canned, which was fine with me, because at this point, I was pretty used to it. I can recall once I was so embarrassed by my frequent firings that once I actually told my girlfriend, who was living with me at the time, that I was so great that I had two companies fighting over me like I was some MVP baseball player because of my fantastic skills, right? So, of course, that was anything but true, we all know that. But the embarrassing truth is that my arrogance basically made me unemployable, and it all blew up in my face just one day. Here it goes. Listen to this. Now, there was this one particular morning I was home with her after being fired yet again from that last job, and I forgot that she left the house after I did, because she left for work at around 8:30. Since I had no job to go to, so I had to pretend to leave my house for work at 8:15, although I had nobody expecting me in that day, since I had no job, so she wouldn't know that something was going on. So I drove my car around the block, waited till she left so I can come back home to my empty house. This time I was actually crying as I sat on the couch because of my many failed attempts being worthy to hold a simple job, right? So once again, I opened up the phone book and started my job search all over again, only to realize that I had actually worked at every single store in the book but one. And that's where my next and final job comes in. This time, working as an installer, basically doing road work and repairs at the wholesale car dealerships, but this time I left a security net behind and I finally got totally committed. This job opening was not a part-time position. That was scary. So what I did is I quit my job at the deli and I was full-time installing for the very first time. I was excited to be doing what I'd love to be doing all day now, which was amazing. Of course, it wasn't all good though. I still had other problems to deal with, like driving around without a valid driver's license, which is a problem and I struggled with for many years before. But I never had this. I had to stomach it. I had no choice because it was the longest time since I couldn't afford to pay for the tickets. No, there was no way out. It was just something I had to deal with, and that's just the choice that I made. So I had to keep working. So to compound all that, at this new job, I was hired to just basically drive from one car dealership to another, all over Nassau County to do the shop's road work. I had a choice to make: either go to work or get the risk of getting arrested, or just to starve. Those were basically my choices. So I didn't even realize it until now, but I was actually risking imprisonment to make my dreams happen. Man, what was I thinking? I gotta be nuts. I don't think I will ever forget just how hard your heart can actually beat in your chest when you feel like, that feeling of fear on a daily basis, because I remember till this day driving around Nassau and how those cop cars used to make me feel when I see those suckers on the road. It was a feeling I hope I never feel again as long as I live. Man, were those some crazy times for me. So while I was working on my new road job, I started collecting all the used stereos and everything else I can grab at the car dealers, rip outs, and all the side jobs I was doing. And I'd keep it all in my trunk or take it home and save it all on the shelf so that when I had enough products, I'd try selling it for a little bit of extra cash. I decided to try out the idea of renting out a small 10 by 10 spot for 20 bucks a day down at the car show swap meet and try to sell it all one day. So I began doing some car shows as a vendor with my girlfriend's help, and we did some pretty good business instantly, actually. The customers and a lot of other people we met there all told us how glad they were that someone like me was finally selling this kind of stuff, and right away my sales took off, and so I was running out of things to sell. Then the idea hit me. I buy up all the good deals I could find from all the other vendors in the swap meet early in the morning before the customers started walking around, and by the end of that very same day, I sold all those very same items back to people at 5 to 10 times profit over what I paid for them just early that very same day. Not bad, huh? So just because this was my niche and people saw it, they saw a lot more value because I was selling it, because I was actually a specialist in this field. Soon people started looking for me, especially to find more deals on stuff that I had in future shows. So I was a real a true opportunist in the making here. I also partnered up with some other guys at the car shows who had hookups with retail stores that were liquidating electronics and unclaimed repairs and stuff like that I had no access to myself. So I used to use that to grow my inventory even more. I also attracted store closing buyout deals and all kinds of guys who had things to just sell and just sell cheap. So I always bought it. I mean, it was guys who I would follow home to their houses, get stuff, and just somebody who knew somebody else, and I was always hustling, making deals. It was a crazy time, and I loved it. So sometimes we'd even stay over at my girlfriend's grandma's house down in Queens when we had a 2-day show at the Belmont Raceway to get a jump on and get in a good spot in the parking fields, just because we knew that those were $1,000 plus easily profit days every single time. It was always a home run down there. I even built myself a 4x8 trailer out of plywood, pulled around with my old 84 Buick Regal that I was driving around in. I'll never forget that car. It blew scalding hot air in the summer because the AC was busted, but it didn't matter. I did whatever it took to keep my business growing. Each trip, my inventory and customers grew, as well as the space I was taking up at these shows too now. Since I was such a natural car guy, I easily made friends with all the people down at the car shows, so I took it even further. I'd go to their car club meetings and see them where they met, at the diners, at bars, wherever they hung out, just to drum up some extra biz. I stuffed windshields with homemade color flyers and even drove a neighborhood stuffing mailboxes to get some new customers. Now, while I had all this little sideshow happening, there was also some other stuff happening at the home base too. One day, I remember the service manager at the Ford dealer I was working at pulled me aside, and he said, "Hey, I wanted to tell you the customers here really like you. And since you're so punctual and take good care of the service issues around here, I'd like you to meet someone." And I said, "Who?" And he said, "The owner at the dealership." And I was like, "Get out of here, really?" I said, "Okay." And we took a walk. Now, I have to admit to you that I am not a suit and tie kind of guy. I felt very uncomfortable walking through this big fancy sales floor with all these people dressed up around me in suits and dresses, and here I am in my jeans and my dirty t-shirt. Now, once we got to the owner's office, he waved us on to come on in and have a seat. His office was huge and surrounded by glass, and I just took a seat in one of the leather chairs he had. The owner went on to tell me about how happy he was with me, so much that he said he had something to me that I never even dreamed of hearing. When he said, "How would you like to own this account?" I was like, I said, well, yes, but how? I don't see how that's even possible. I work for the shop down the road who handles your account. He said, "Young man, don't worry about all that. All you need from me are 3 things come next Monday when you start working for me." I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "You need these 3 things. 1, a business license. Number 2, liability insurance. Number 3, whatever inventory you need to come and do the jobs that you see you're doing here now. Those are the same parts I need you to have with you when you're ready to start doing the work come Monday." I could not believe it. I knew that I could make the same $350 I made working all week at my job in a matter of a few hours working here for myself. I was going crazy. I couldn't believe I couldn't wait to get my hand on all those job POs. Now, at this time, I'm an amateur at business at best, right? But make no mistake, I was at the county center getting my DBA business certificate, and I had that business insurance policy written to a check to an account with no money in it, but that didn't matter. But I had that policy ready in hand for that upcoming Monday. My new company, Cranking Car Stereo, was born. Now, lastly, my new soon-to-be wife and no longer my girlfriend Cindy had agreed to lend my new venture about $1,000 that I badly needed to get my first wholesale order for inventory. So I put my new business credentials to work, set up an account, placed my very first real wholesale order for product I'd be needing for the Ford dealership, and everything was set to go. Now, Monday comes. I pulled in my regular spot and I headed right to the service manager's counter. He came around, he said hi to me, he said, "Here we go." I was so excited, I could barely contain myself. We got into the owner's big glass office again, sat down in the same leather chair, but this time there were 3 men sitting there, not just the one. And I said, that's weird. The one owner looked at me and he says, I gotta tell you, I love the idea of you servicing this dealership, but my 2 partners don't feel the same. So he went on to say that he went to bat for me, but it wasn't gonna work out. I was absolutely speechless. I was speechless. I had done all I can possibly do to hold back the tears until I got outside where my old Regal was parked. I didn't know what to do. Scream, have a fit punching on the steering wheel, or just let it all out, or just do it all at the same time. Here I thought I was finally going to get ahead, but instead of getting ahead, I'm now even further behind, because now I added the debt I created and the promise I made to my fiance to pay her back. The newly formed company I just created had no business to even do. I literally felt like dying. So after a while, I managed to put myself together, and I figured I better at least get back to my job to get my work orders for the day. But instead of getting work, I got my boss standing in the hall with his arms crossed telling me, "Ah, you like stealing my customers, huh? Be glad I don't give you a beating." And then you guessed it, I was fired yet again. This drive home now felt like an absolute eternity. When I got there, I just fell on the couch. I was so depressed I couldn't even physically move. I stayed there until Cindy got home from work. When she said, "Hi honey, how was your day?" I said, "Great day. Thanks, how was yours?" All night I thought about, how am I going to fix this mess? The last thing I wanted to do was let her down, right? Unbelievable. The next day I started to think again. I still had my side work and in the car shows, but no real steady job. So I asked myself, how did the big stores get all that business? What was I missing? Then it hit me. People call stores from the phone book for estimates, right? Of course. Now, if I can get some of those calls, I could compete. And since people usually start alphabetically and work from the top down, I'd be sure to get a call since my company began with a C. Now, if I can only get some, but how? I wasn't even in a phone book. So I called the phone company and I says, I want a print ad in the phone book under the car stereo and car alarm headings. They said that the next phone book was coming out in 2 months and I still had time to get an ad proofed and submitted. So I jumped at the chance and I did just that. The only issue was that I needed an actual second line for my phone to send the calls to, because we all know real businesses usually have at least 2 phone lines. The operator said you do have 2 lines, of course. And I said, well, not at the moment, but I'd like to add that second one on. So I went ahead and got a second line, and here's where it gets interesting. When this was happening, people were just starting to switch their beepers over to cell phones, so I got a Nokia cell phone and used the star 56 feature, which forwarded the second line of my fake business at home straight to me so I could answer customers no matter where I was. Now I look like a real business instantly. It was almost genius. Now listen to this great little story. It is priceless. I call it the John and Martin story. Now, I knew I couldn't compete with the store since I didn't actually have a store. Details, right? So I got the idea of an even better service, and the plan was very simple. I would just undercut the store's prices so low that they wouldn't even have a choice but to use me instead. And what we would do is we would drive right to their homes or their workplace and do the work for them wherever they were on their schedule. Now, when the customers called, I told them my name was Martin, which of course it is, but I said that the installer who would be showing up at their home of business name is John. Now, on this one particular day, a woman called us up and wanted a quote for an alarm and remote start installed in her Chevy. She went on to tell me that the best deal she found was $399 installed, and she needed to drop a car off for the entire day, no loaner car, and I said, that's ridiculous. We could do the same job, $300 cash, no problem, have it done in under 2 hours, and she wouldn't even have to leave her house. Then there was a short pause on the phone. Then she said, when can you be here? I said, lucky for you, I just had a cancellation, and I could send John to her over there in 30 minutes. So I did. Now here's the funny part. John started working, and about 30 minutes into the job, he knocked on the lady's door and explained that he needed an extra part for the factory's anti-theft system in the key that cost an additional $50. This woman immediately freaked out and said she'd be on the phone to the office to complain. I said, hey, okay, whatever you gotta do, you do what you gotta do. I said, go ahead. So I said, okay, and I went back on my knees and went to work, and of course, a minute later, my cell phone rang, and it was the angry woman freaking out. So I called him, I said, calm down a little bit, calmed it down, gotta relax, and I said, listen, I'll split the difference with you, 25, and we agreed to complete the job. And then all of a sudden, I heard her at the front door saying, I just talked to your boss, and you can finish the job. I said, thanks, and I went on doing the job, and I said, thank you, tell Martin I'm glad everything worked out. Pretty funny, right? Now this went on for a couple years and it never got old. It was always funny to me. At this point, I was making 20 times what I was making at my real jobs, and I was finally realizing the real freedom was actually within my reach. It was great. I loved it. I was doing things I could never do before. Just simple things like visit Cindy at her workplace for lunch, lie in my backyard on a sunny day and relax with the dog and a beer and just do whatever I wanted to do. Which I did for a couple years while I saved up all my money in a shoebox I used to hide in the attic until I got that urge to do the next big thing I wanted to achieve. I didn't even know what that thing was just yet, but I knew it was there somewhere down building inside of me. But in the meantime, I just kept busy, kept working. So while all this was happening, I grew not only as an entrepreneur, but also as a man when I purchased my first home, and I also got married to Cindy finally. Because I'm the type that gets bored real quick, it wasn't long until I needed some new challenges once the honeymoon was over, and I got right back into the thick of it. Now, I was happy to have created this new flourishing retail business and also to have these car shows going on at the same time, and I was also still discontented and nervous on those days when the phone wasn't ringing. I hated it when it was dead, and I hated it even more when it was too busy. There was no balance. I was finally learning what a real businessman feels like, alone at the top, as they say. And it was all alien. So my next mission was to keep myself busy working and making some extra money on those quiet days. I knew that there was some way for me to make better use of my time and be able to use to service all these customers I had going on currently all at the same time. So I figured if I could meet two people at once in retail, this shouldn't be too hard, right? So then it came to me. I could solicit the more approachable small used car dealers around town and grow my business with them since I didn't have luck with the larger ones, and maybe keep a steady income going on year round, right? Especially in the cold New York winters when it's not so easy to keep your hands warm when you're working outside. So out I went once again. No experience, not much sales skills, and very nervous asking for work again. My first day out didn't turn up one lead. Not one account would hire me, so the next day I went out and I tried again. Nothing. Third day, finally, mercifully, someone said, yes, finally. He went on to say, I need a lot of cars done. When can you start? I said, I can start today, sir. And I started listening very carefully to what he needed done, and I figured maybe it'd take me a few hours to knock it all out, but I took my time instead, and I milked that work, and I would take up my spare time for 2 days. By the end of day 2, he already had my next week half booked up, and we became good friends, actually, and did lots of business together over the next several years. Over the next, few months or so, I was asking one small dealer eventually into another, and this one, to the next one, and I actually acquired over 30 accounts spread all over Long Island at this point. Some big ones, some small ones. So many I needed actually a file cabinet just to keep them all organized. But one of my best was an Eastern New York account which I had with Enterprise Car Sales, which was by far the best one anyone could have ever asked for. That one account made me take it to the next level and showed me just how much opportunity there was in expediting if I was willing to put in the work to get it. So I gave those people late nights, weekends, long drives into the city, and anything else they ever asked me for whenever they wanted it. Like clockwork, the checks were piling up in the mailbox, cash was overflowing in the attic, and I was living the dream in a way I never even thought possible. Now, between the retail sales, the swap meets, the word-of-mouth customers, and all the wholesale dealer accounts I had, I was working at least 15 hours a day. I worked every day as hard as I could until I had absolutely nothing left to give. I remember this one sunny day I was outside replacing an antenna on a car down at a car dealer owned by this guy named Sal. He was a really nice guy, and I used to spend a lot of time over here working with him. And one day we got into a conversation, and he said to me, "Hey Marty, why don't you move into the vacant store next door? Why are you always driving all over town when the people can come right here to you?" I said, "Come on, Sal, you're crazy." But what a thought, right? It stopped and kind of made me think, but I got over it and got back to work. But could this possibly be what I was looking for to make everything fit together somehow? It was as if he was meant to say those words to me at that exact moment. A week or so later, I made that offer to rent that spot right next to him on Route 112. And so my first real brick and mortar store was born. This would have given me the solution I was working for, to work inside on the cold winters, a nicer place to showcase my stock than a folding table down in a car show field or some windy parking lot or a shelf in the garage of my house. It was a real business with a real address, a real workshop, and I don't think I could have been more proud of myself than I was back then when it was all going up. I knew this was the missing piece I had been searching for to make my career finally complete. Me and my family rebuilt this store showroom, built the soundboard, the counters, the walls, and everything in it, all by hand. The store's displays were full of stock, the neon lights were glowing, the signs and flags were up outside, and we had our much anticipated grand opening. My first employee I ever hired was on the curb, right there in front of the street, because it was so close to the street. When I was down on my knees installing a car alarm, that one guy, this one Spanish guy walking down Patchogue, he turned into 3. Along with a window tinter within only a short month's time. Everything was going just as planned. Unbelievable. It was crazy. Now, it wasn't all fun. Not everyone was thrilled to be seeing me growing. The competitors I've come to know and love up and down Route 112, which is most of the people I used to work for, mind you, all came down to talk to me and even stalked me working at night in attempts to get me upset. They called the town officials on me, complained to vendors and suppliers about me not being a legit business, telling them not to sell me, anything you could think of just to be difficult. But in my mind, I had no competition. I was the competition. My only wish that I could open up in their own parking lot so I could shut them down one by one. All this face-to-face sales and wheeling dealing I've been doing up to now was paying off to me in dividends for me. My sales and people skills grew to a level that I didn't even know I was capable of having. I had a near perfect record for closing sales. The shop was usually booked up fully by 11 o'clock each and every day. I finally found my gift, and it all seemed to come so easy to me now. This is what I was meant to do. I finally found my power place. I even managed to steal away a top qualified installer named Tom from another store that came to work for me. I had the best of everything. It had to be that way. I was all I was willing to settle for. After a few months of the new store being open and the Christmas rush had just passed by, the unthinkable happened. This winter was brutally record-breaking cold and snowy. I had to use my kerosene heater to keep the store warm because the landlord was too cheap to fix the heater on the roof. Now, this one day, in between watching the front of the store for walk-ins and installing a remote start out on the street, I took a break to warm my hands and bullshit with the guys next door, Sal and his partner, for a couple of minutes, the car dealer. And after about 10 minutes of talking, I saw my installer Tom run up to me and say, "Marty, the store's on fire." I said, "Get out of here." I opened up the doors between me and Sal's place, and what I saw looked like a part of a movie to me. It was too late to save anything. It was too late. The business was already gone. The storefront was completely incinerated, and half the building was basically already toasted. There was nothing left. Even my first new car I ever owned that was parked out front was completely incinerated. The fire burnt so hot it was melting the street and the lamppost down. I can remember sitting back in the cop car just holding my head just to call home and tell Cindy what had happened. She came down to the scene and saw the aftermath and said, "Aren't you sad?" I said, "I am sad to see all this happen, but something better will come along for us." I had to tell myself that. It had to. I knew it would just have to. Otherwise, how was I able not to break down in tears? Now, I could have just went back to working out of the house again, but now I had people relying on me, like Tom. I mean, what about this poor guy? I promised him a safe, secure job. He must be saying to himself, I knew it wasn't such a good idea getting involved with this dude, and everyone else who was watching me get this far. I could never let myself take a step back down, as easy as it would have been to do so right there and then. As I somehow knew it all would, good fortune did come my way. A week to the day the store had burnt down, I signed a brand new lease on an even bigger store that was more than 5 times the size of the old one. It was in a prime spot on a corner right next to a 7-Eleven in a high traffic spot. It was an anchor store in a nicer section of town. The rent was sky high, of course, but so were my expectations. So I took the leap and I went for it. This store was way bigger and took much longer to get ready. But on borrowed time and borrowed insurance money from the old store, piece by piece we got that store put together. While this new store was getting remodeled, my neighbor from down the street once again was up to his old tricks, this time using the fire marshal to try and ruin me this time once again. Now, there was a threat to chain my doors shut because we used gas heaters to frame walls and sheetrock this winter when we were remodeling. So since I had a record for kind of burning buildings down, we covered the front windows to keep those prying eyes out, and we worked like ants way into the night for months to get it as ready as quick as possible since I was bleeding money. And if that wasn't enough, I was also getting threatened by the town sign inspector along with the building inspector, which all had their hands out for a bribe to make them go away. Man, it seemed like if it wasn't one thing, it was 3 others. All winter long, we worked our butts off and we got that store completed. Come springtime, it was finally ready. When it was all done and ready to be open for business, I can remember just standing out there on Route 112 and I would just stare at it, just staring. It was beautiful. It was just absolutely beautiful to me. I could hardly believe that huge store was actually all mine. I felt like I was standing right beside myself. And once I was back in business, it was almost as if I had never even closed. It was just so seamless. All my prior work for my retail customers and wholesale accounts, they all just resumed and came back so naturally. The business just came through the doors and the store flourished like never even before. My staff grew up to a half a dozen full-time guys now. So no longer was I that lowly bottom feeder selling used radios at the car show. Although I wasn't that guy anymore, I always maintained that grateful attitude as if I still were. And I think I always will, actually. And I think that had a lot to do with why I was so successful all this time, even up to now. I went from the smallest of the small to owning the biggest shop on Route 112. And I gotta tell you, it felt good. As I was growing this business to its full potential, I gradually eased out of the installation bay a little bit, doing a little less of the legwork except for doing some of that inspiring, enticing custom stuff that I just still to this day love messing around with. Instead, now I was focusing more on the management of the business and doing sales, which became quickly my favorite part of my job. I just loved it, and I still today I love people and love sales. I love the whole part of it. And I just put the right people in the right places to handle the job of the day-to-day operations, and life was good. Meanwhile, I shifted my attention to my growing family at home. Once again, I found that elusive balance. I could now leave the store confidently and go for a relaxing boat ride or a fun ride on the quad in the woods behind my backyard and spend some time having a quiet picnic lunch with my wife at home. After a short time, I had my firstborn daughter, and 2 years later, my son came along. It was a great feeling to just hold my children in my arms, knowing I could always take care of them in a way that they deserve to be loved and cared for in ways I never had my own. So as the store continued to prosper, and it gave me and my new family everything we ever wanted. We had a home, not just a house, and of course we had all the other tangible things that you dream of having, but more so, I found freedom, contentment, and immeasurably more options. That's what I was always looking for. Since the stereo shop was running so well, I decided to start up a sister company importing electronics direct from China, along with my Pioneer rep and good friend George. We had a great idea. Once again, we had another great idea. And we would just basically carbon copy the place where I bought my very first stereo parts order from, which is $1,000 I bought from Cindy, if you remember, and right down to the printed catalog. We would just change the name, and we called it What You Want. I mean, even the name was arrogant. I mean, What You Want, right? It was funny, even listening to a woman answer the phone, What You Want? People would say, what'd you say? So the business plan was simple. We would just buy the installation parts and accessories and bring them in overseas in 40-foot containers and resell them to all my competition in Long Island, Brooklyn, and Queens without them even knowing it was me, because George would be the face of the company and I'd be in the back as the phone tech support. So now I had not just one, but 2 companies to look after. And it was fun for a while, but after some time, I went and sold all my shares back to my partner George in the wholesale business because we became more of a debt collector than a wholesale distributor. We had more stories than Walt Disney over this operation. So back to being a solo act I went because it's where I did my best work. But it was fun to copy exactly the installation parts company that I modeled exactly from the same distributor I placed my very first order from way back when with $1,000 that Cindy had given me all those years ago, only to sell those same exact parts back to the same competitors that I was competing with years later. You talk about full circle, huh? That's weird. But year after year, I saw my competitors down on Route 112 disappear. Until 2007, there were only 2 of us left. Now, there was only 1 store out of a dozen that competed with me locally for years when I decided to leave Route 112 in 08. Now, it started out that there was 10. Now it was down to 2. So the reason for me wanting to leave was basically the same as it was for everybody else, except I wasn't forced out, I chose to. The front door that used to ring with customers all day long stopped ringing because hard times hit us all during this recession. Unfortunately, my employees weren't busy enough to keep around any longer, so what can I do? A downsize was imminent. It had to happen. So while all this was unfortunate, of course, I was ready. While most of my competitors were complacent to just do walk-in sales and wait for the customers to come to them, I was going after the online sales customers as well. So for me, it was fun. So instead of just fearing the online sales channel like most of the other guys were, I actually embraced the inevitable change that was coming, and as always, I was looking forward to the next big thing. Unlike most people who despise the internet, I actually loved it, made use of it, and saw it as a great new opportunity. It was, as at the time, the web was still really young, and I capitalized on both my strengths, my web presence and my retail store at the same time. So I had been doing so well online in the past couple years, selling part-time, that I was excitedly looking forward to my next change, which was going to be doing online sales exclusively, and I would be walking away from face-to-face electronic sales, expediting and installation forever. Now, after some negotiating with the landlord and the lease payoff deal to the tune of only 20 grand to get permission to move out during the height of this recession, I was free once again to pursue my new interests. My next home was in an industrial setting, only a few miles away, but it was as if I moved to a whole nother world. This new online business called Let's Go Electronics evolved from a basic startup size operation into a multi-million-dollar year earning machine in only a couple years' time that made triple-digit gains year after year of its inception. It actually wound up turning into 2 e-commerce websites, 2 eBay stores, plus an Amazon website with a busy office, warehouse, and IT staff attending to it full time. Now, fast forward to today, I managed to keep my connection to the people and the industry I love by giving back and sharing all that I can through my educational YouTube channel, which you're watching now. Now, this also became very rewarding to me as well. It's a phenomenal success, and it's where I get a lot of my genuine happiness from, knowing that I help enrich others through our shared interest in the electronics industry and other topics together. I found my purpose, my gifts, and the work I love, and have incredible amounts of fun doing it every single day. I hope that this inspires you to do the same. My work is not actual work to me, and I know it's not, because I don't feel like I'm ever working. And that's how I know for a fact I am in the right business. So this is a true story of how this world can yield to you if you're willing to put the work in and let your feet take you where your heart is meant to be.